You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. It's Halloween week, so I hope you'll go to Amazon and pick up a copy of my short story, The Witching Hour. My guest this week is SEAL Team 666 author, Weston Ochse. Weston, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Hank.
You have a brand new book out in the SEAL Team 666 line, and I must say that I'm just finishing up the first SEAL Team 666, and you are causing me a great loss of sleep because I need to get through these books, and I still have a life to lead to, and you're not helping. So thank you for this great series of books.
I'm told that my books are better than caffeine. I'm told that they're better than caffeine. You know, they will keep you awake until the very end. Especially the SEAL Team series. We strove hard, myself and my editors at St. Martin's Press. We really strove, or is it strived? Well, strived. We'll say strived to make this as fast-paced as possible, yet with maintaining characterizations and plot and everything else. So, for instance, the first version I handed in had 15,000 more words than the version you just read.
Oh, really? Wow, really? You just trimmed that down for pacing and those sorts of things?
Exactly, and you know, I moved some of it around, but you know, we ended up losing those because, you know, a lot of it is that when you first start writing a novel, you're getting to know the characters yourself, and
right.
So you tend to write a lot of extraneous things. Like if you've ever read a book that in the beginning you get bogged down right away,
yes.
I think that's sometimes the young author or the old author's, you know, kind of violation of that principle that, you know, maybe the first 2 or 3 chapters you write aren't where the book starts. Maybe it starts a little bit later on because what you're really doing is getting to know your characters. And in that case, that was sort of how it was. It wasn't just the first part, but as I would introduce a character, you know, I would interlay some backstory here and there, and you know, we just decided that you know, maybe I was doing too much backstory, so let's just trim that back a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you what, from the first page, you were right in the thick of the action, and you know, your pulse rate doesn't come back down until about 100 pages in. So,
That's good.
That is a tough thing for writers sometimes. I think because we sometimes we hold the writing process as too precious, and it's hard to trim away parts of the story when we feel like everything we write is so important. What is that editing process like for you? Because, you know, with trimming away probably about 15% of your book, was it that you cut out?
Well, you know, back when I first started writing, if anybody was to even hint that I was to lose 15,000 words, I would probably scream and you know, throw a fit. But you know, that's what a beginning writer does. I've come to realize that these editors, at least editors at the bigger houses, you know, who've seen a lot and done a lot and have some bona fides, they know what they're doing. They were hired there for a reason, you know.
Right.
They were hired to make the company money, and they don't make the company money if the books that they edit are dull and nobody reads them. So, you know, I got past that very quickly. In fact, I first encountered that when I was working for Abaddon Books. I wrote a couple books for them back in the late 2000s, and you know, they edited heavily. But I told myself, I said these are, you know, this is a big time publishing outfit. I really have to thicken my skin here and, you know, kind of look at what they say. I mean, I don't take every single edit that I'm given, but I weigh it before I disregard it, and I probably take about 90% of what, or 95% of what my editors recommend that I change, because if I'm trusting them to make sure that my words are good, I got to trust them to make sure that the book is great. Another thing that helped me was I went back and I got my Master of Fine Arts in creative writing, and I took a couple master's level screenwriting classes. And I've since created an online course that I haven't taught in a while, um, uh, that takes screenwriting techniques and uh, lets me utilize them in writing fiction. Because a lot of the techniques in screenwriting have to do with pacing and plot and character arcs and things that are recognizable to us on almost the elemental level. So, I applied them to the 666 novels as well, which is, I think, one reason why MGM picked it up, almost right away.
And thinking in terms of screenplay has to help you to get your visuals kind of set down, doesn't it? I mean, in thinking cinematically, does that help?
Oh, it does. It does. And when I finish writing a scene, and I can see it. I know that the folks at the uh, film production companies, they'll be able to see it even better. Because the idea is if they can see it visually, then they're going to buy it, especially if it's a decent story. And I think SEAL Team 666 is more than decent.
Excellent. Well, we're going to come back to the 666 series of books in a minute, but tell us how you got started writing. Is this something that you've always pursued, or is this something you came to later? What's your story with writing?
So you want my superhero origin story? Okay,
Yes.
no problem. I can
Absolutely. And
give you my origin.
I've seen a picture of your desk, so don't pretend that you don't have one.
Oh, no, no. But I got rid of that desk about
No, you
4 months.
did not.
I did. It was time to pass it on. I
Okay.
passed it on to um, a friend of mine, Dan Southard. And for those of you who haven't seen pictures of my desk, it was essentially um, um, battleship gray military desk, two pedestal desk, um, and I painted the feet red, and I plastered comic book covers over the whole thing as kind of like a um, a monument, nay, an altar to everything great about comics. Because I'm a Bronze Age, Silver Age comic book geek, so I can really get down, and just kind of looking at the covers as I'm writing inspired me. But I'm in a different place now. I wanted to kind of streamline a little bit. So I have a nice smaller desk, one that doesn't get all the clutter that the other one had. But back to my
Gotcha.
origin story,
Back to your
right?
origin story.
Um, so I was about 6 or 7 years old when I wrote my first short story. It's called What Became of Charlie. It was published in the Panther Press. Still have a copy of it. And it was a story about a kid whose mother said, don't um, take a shortcut. And he took a shortcut and he was eaten by a bear. And I guess in that the parents kind of retaliated and got upset. And my first published and destroyed because they felt it was too violent for the minds of children. Never mind that a child wrote it. So I didn't write another thing for uh, about 24 years until I turned 30. And when I turned 30, I did what I thought every 30-year-old did, but I'm finding out more that I was kind of like the only one. Um, and that's I looked back and I saw all the things I wanted to change, and I decided to change them. And then I looked forward and I saw all the things that I hadn't done that I wanted to do, and I started doing them. So one of the things was I wanted to be a writer because, I mean, we all, before we start writing, find ourselves, with all these ideas. We don't know what to do with them. And I knew I wanted to be a writer, so I just finally sat down and I wrote my first short story, which was incredibly terrible. And then I wrote another short story, which is even worse. And then I started working on a novel, which was just terrible. But with my um, total, I think I had probably a +5 cape of narcissism because I should have stopped then, but I didn't because I had this idea that I would eventually become somebody, and I would eventually get published. And you know, it took 42 rejections um, of my short stories before I was first published. But from then on, it's sort of worked out.
What keeps you going in the face of 42 rejection letters?
The knowledge that Stephen King had 200. I think if I had 201 rejection letters, I might decide to quit. But shoot, man, I mean, and I don't know if that's just urban legend or not, but I had heard that he had 200. So if that's the fact, then who am I to stop?
And that's just
I'm
paying
not Stephen
dues.
King, but I could the next. I know, right? So I just kept doing it, and part of it was also that I was submitting only to professional paying markets, um, because I I believe that the acknowledgement that you're a writer or an author is that you get paid for your work, that you're a professional,
Right.
right? If if you give your work away, well, I don't know. I guess you can call yourself a professional, but that's not my termination, my terms. You have to excuse me. I make up some words sometimes because I'm a product of the Tennessee education system. So we only had like a certain amount of vocabulary. So I tend to make my things up.
Well, I'm a product of the Mississippi education system, so we're close kin,
Oh, okay.
probably.
So you know exactly what
Yeah,
I'm talking
I do. I do. Uh, Weston, how would you describe uh, your work? How would you describe either the genre, or maybe genre's too claustrophobic a term, but what would you describe your style as?
about. I write a lot about redemption and responsibility, two R's. If you read my short stories or my novels, the plots all center around redemption and responsibility. I don't like revenge, right?
Yeah.
Revenge is too easy, but I like people to be able to redeem themselves because um, you notice that pretty much most of my characters are all broken in some way, right?
Yes.
They all have these faults and flaws, and I want to explain why they have those, and I want to give them a chance to level up. I want to give them a chance to overcome those flaws. Sometimes some of the characters don't, but you as the reader are going through and experiencing what that character is experiencing, and I think a lot of that um, we can mirror in our own lives. We can see, yeah, I've done that before, or I would never do that, or wow, look at how this guy overcame that. I mean, sure, it's horror, sure, it's science fiction, sure, it's supernatural, but guess what? It's actual people in there that I consider to be real people doing those things. So
And redemption stories are the ultimate human stories, aren't they?
they are. They absolutely are.
Yeah. And if you have characters that are all Mary Sue's, if you will, that are the perfect character with no flaws, there's no real room uh, to get engaged with that character, and to root for them and to want to see them go through their journey.
Exactly. I hate the Dudley Do-Rights of the world, and I don't like to write about them, because they're just too perfect. So why even care?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we had a conversation in my house a little while ago, and I was talking to my wife and kids about horror versus thriller and what the difference is. And would you like to weigh in on that? You are, as a writer of horror, is there a difference in uh, flying by the seat of your pants and keeping someone biting their nails and horror? And how would you make a how would you differentiate, if there is a way to?
Well, I always felt that horror was a feeling. You can have um, a story that has absolutely no supernatural elements, and it can be very horrific, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Hollywood has capitalized on that as well because you see a lot of the serial killer movies, which are horror movies. So I can't tell you any number of people who say horror author, and people say, well, I don't read that. I don't read that sort of stuff, right? And then I
Yeah.
start mentioning books by Stephen King, and they're like, oh yeah, I read him. Well, he's a horror author.
Right.
But see, they connotate horror as being something gross and terrible and whatever. Um, um, so to me, horror is a feeling. But let's face it, um, publishers, more so booksellers, they want to find a place on the shelf to put us.
Yeah.
So I think in that case, a horror novel is differentiated from a thriller novel. A horror novel would be one that has some element of the supernatural, whether it be a trope or something you just made up, like a Clive Barker monster, or and a thriller. is something that takes you by the seat of your pants and doesn't really have any supernatural elements. Um, Thomas Dunn Books calls the SEAL Team 666 books. Um, if
Hello,
if
Weston.
if you yeah, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You dropped out. The last thing I heard was calls the SEAL Team 666 books.
Okay, yeah. Thomas Dunn Books. They call the SEAL Team 666 books military supernatural thrillers,
Gotcha.
which I don't think there's a space on the shelf for those,
I
but you know,
I have
it
not
it
seen
it
that
kind
space in the store.
of but in 3 words it kind of tells you what it is. So you know, it's very explanatory.
Yes. And in reading that book, there was nothing that grossed me out or had me, um, repulsed like some of the slasher horror films that you see now. And it seems to me like in film that horror has turned into just going over the top and seeing just how repulsive you can be and just how heinous you can make things. And I think in the literary tradition, uh, I would like to think that we're able to tell more meaningful stories in a lot better way.
I think so. In fact, I think it was the demigod of directors, Wes Craven, who actually started that when he made Last House on the Left. Um, that's considered a horror film, yet there's no supernatural elements. In fact, it looks almost like a shaky cam docudrama. When I first saw it on TV, I thought it was real, right up until the point where I found out it wasn't, because it was just that good. Um, but you know, that's the sort of stuff that he likes to do. Um, Whereas folks like me and you and Peter Straub and Stephen King and Joe Hill and Brian Keene and writers of our ilk, you know, we like to write something centered around a character. We like to put that character in a supernatural setting, and we like to show you how, in the beginning, something happens to the character or something has happened to the character, and we want you to not necessarily be terrified, but we want you to be terrified for that character and care for that character and be concerned about what happens to that character as we as authors put him through our various hoops, you know.
Yes. Uh, Tell us about military horror. You published a book called Snafu this year. As a matter of fact, you published 4 books in a year's time.
I
Very
did.
prolific. But tell us about
I did do
military
four.
horror. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I did do 4 books. Snafu wasn't my publication. It was published by Cohesion Books
Okay.
out of Australia, but I had a novella in one of them. And I think military horror is nothing more than horror with a military bent. You know, in my story, I kind of take you back to 1969, San Francisco in the hate, and I have a special undercover military unit in San Francisco that's not only um, checking on the peace-loving protesters, but also trying to protect um, all of our techs and gadgetry at Lawrence Livermore Labs from being stolen by the Soviets. And you know, the idea that you know we have these supernatural groups out there protecting and helping us, I've always liked. So writing stories like that, or writing stories like 666, you know, is just a lot of fun to me.
What is it about what is it about the supernatural that appeals to you in these stories?
Well, I believe in the supernatural. I really do. I mean, I believe in ghosts. I don't know if they're, you know, some spooky things from hell, but you know, they might be some type of negative or positive energy that is just existing around us. You know, I'm not smart enough to tell you what they are, but I believe in them. Um, when I was a kid and The Exorcist came out, my father was working at an Alexian Brothers nursing home in Signal Mountain, Tennessee. In fact, he was running it, and we met this father from the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis. And if you know anything about the origin story of the movie The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty wrote it based upon information that he got from interviews conducted at the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis. Well, this father, this priest, back in the mid 70s, he told me and my parents that he was there during that time. He was there during the exorcism. It actually happened. So I grew up from a very, very young age, believing in not necessarily good and evil, but the fact that there were things out there beyond our ken, you know? So that's part of my DNA. So when I write, I like to write about it, you know?
Well, in the Triple Six novels, you do deal with this. I mean, and without giving away too much to folks who haven't read it, you've got a team of SEAL uh, operatives who are commissioned to fight supernatural threats, and and almost like the evil behind the evil
Hmm.
is
Yeah,
is how I look at it. Go ahead.
the
I'm
way I
sorry.
pitched it is the way I pitched it is what if there's an even more special SEAL team that protects America from supernatural attacks, right? And what if we've had this group operating within our government since the Continental Congress, only under different names. The current name is SEAL Team 666, but before then they were known as something else. And what if we have like a complete history in the mission logs for all these different missions that were conducted since basically 1775? And and I think that if if uh, if we did have something like that, it would be just like these guys. Where the SEALs are the very tip of the spear, the first ones to go in. These guys are the very tip of the supernatural spear. They go in whenever there's some sort of threat, like you read in SEAL Team 666. There's a prequel novella out there called Border Dogs, which you can read free at tor.com. In that, we have the SEAL team going against narco terrorists that use chupacabra to carry drugs across the Mexican border.
That's so epic. Just the whole premise.
Right, right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So when you started publishing these books, have you received any letters saying, "Mr. Oakes, you're getting a little too close to the truth"?
No, I haven't. I a couple times people have asked me, um, because I currently work for the government. They've asked me if they want if if I think I should vet my books through them, and I said no, if they're fiction, you know, they're pure fiction, and the stuff that I get that looks classified comes off the internet. Anybody can find it. It's all there. you know. But as you read SEAL Team 666, I'm sure that it felt authentic, right? It felt
Yes.
like it was real. That's because I've spent the last 30 years in the military. I can write military stuff. I'm not a SEAL, but I have friends who are SEALs, so I can talk to them and I can ask them questions. One of the things that I was careful to do, however, is and I got some interesting mail from the first book, because in the first book they're using older weapons and equipment and some older tactics that they no longer use. And um, some Captain Obvious emailed me and gave me this long email lecture about how, oh, they use this and this and they do this and this. And I'm like, dude, I know, but I don't want to put it out there for everybody to read. I don't want to, in my glorification of SEALs and the supernatural, in my having fun writing about SEAL Team 666, put any real SEAL in danger. So I'm not going to out their tactics in their right equipment. So I didn't get a response back.
Yeah. So you purposefully dialed back the technology a little bit just to protect
I did.
our men and women that are on the front lines.
Absolutely. I mean, trust me, they have some stuff that is just, you know, it it rattles the mind. But I'm not going to put that on there because, I mean, shoot, it's good enough as it is.
That's right. Speaking of your military service, and thank you for your service to our country, by the way. You were deployed in Afghanistan recently, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in Afghanistan last year. I was in Kabul. Um, I was a busy man, but somehow I managed to write Grunt Life, the science fiction book that came out last year from Solaris. And I also finished up the edits for Age of Blood, which is the second SEAL Team 666 book. And I wrote a Clive Barker short story for the new Median anthology. So um, I I'm the sort of person I can write in a moving vehicle. I can probably write in the back of a tank. I can write, in awkward positions. I can write pretty much anywhere. I'm not one of those persons who need a pristine, clean area and total quietness to write. I can just kind of punch it out and go into my own self.
What is Grunt Life about? You said you wrote it while you were in Afghanistan. What's the
I did.
premise of that book?
So I've always wanted to write like a pure science fiction book, right? I love Joe Haldeman. I love John Scalzi. I mean, Heinlein and Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. Oh my God. If they were right, if they were alive at this moment, I would be their biggest fanboys, probably stalking them, because I grew up on their work and just thought it was so incredible.
Right.
So I got a chance to work with Solaris, which is a big name in mass market paperbacks for science fiction, and I pitched the idea. Well, what if there's an alien invasion? Um, what if the governments knew about it, but they just didn't do anything about it because they couldn't get their act together? And what if a private contractor company got together a brigade-sized element of PTSD sufferers because the very fact they have PTSD makes them better soldiers to go up against this particular type of aliens. Um, and they jumped on it. Uh, it's been called the darkest science fiction book that they've ever published because it deals with real PTSD. I mean, I wanted to put that front and center because if you think about it, there's a lot of PTSD negative books and movies out there, but there aren't hardly any PTSD positive books or movies out there. And I wanted to show where, sure, you have, you have a couple thousand people with serious mental problems, but guess what? They got those fighting for their country. They got those doing things that nobody else would do. And there's a way that they can use those to benefit the world. And so I really enjoyed writing that. In fact, I'm halfway through the sequel as we speak.
Have you gotten any response from people that are familiar with PTSD to
I have.
Grunt
I
Life?
have.
Yeah.
I have.
What's
I've
the
had a lot
response
of
to that been
stuff.
like?
All, all of them positive. All of them positive. They liked the fact that it was a PTSD positive book. They liked the fact that I knew what I was talking about. I mean, come on, I've been 30 years in the military. I've been to Afghanistan. I have PTSD. Not to the extreme of some people, but when I came back, it was bad enough to where I couldn't ride a motorcycle anymore because I'm too hyper attentive. I need to know what's around me at certain times, or else I get kind of nervous. Um, so most people who have PTSD. The interesting thing about it is in this second book, the whole world has PTSD because the whole world has just suffered an invasion. So now every single person who survived is a PTSD sufferer.
Wow. Now, you talked about when you were in Afghanistan and your being able to write just wherever you were and to get into yourself. And you also talked earlier about writing and then going back and editing and trimming what you've written. What is your writing process like? Do you start with an outline? Do you just begin with an idea and just run with it and then go back and trim out later? Or when you start a project, uh, do you know where the project is going to go?
So most times I have an outline. In fact, most publishers want an outline. They, before they give you a 10, 20, $30,000 advance, they want to make sure that you know what the hell you're doing.
Right.
So they want to take a look at the outline. Even if your pitch was good, they still want the outline. And I've had editors want me to tweak the outline before they'll accept it, which is cool. Because not only does it convince them that I know where it's going, but it it helps me. I've heard a lot of authors say that they don't want to use an outline because it can limit their creativity. Well, it doesn't limit mine. I'm able to be really creative within the outline. I see the outline as being like a GPS, right? It might tell me to turn left at this street, but I know that if I turn left a little farther down, I can still get there. So, I don't follow it like it's a Pythagorean theorem. I I I follow it, like it's somebody's acute recommendations, not necessarily in order.
Yeah. Well, Stephen King famously, in his book on writing, was very critical of people that write without lines. And I read his book when I first started writing long form, and I kind of had that in the back of my head. But the problem was I knew where my book was going. So, always having him in the back of my head saying that I was doing it wrong, uh, was frustrating. But I had to just finally say, you know what? I, I do know where I'm going to go with this book. Uh, do you ever find uh, yourself writing and the story is going a completely different place than you
Yeah,
thought it would?
yeah, that happens to me quite a bit, especially when you write strong characters. A book that came out last month, Halfway House,
Yes.
which is a haunted house novel set in Los Angeles. Um, um, that has a character in there called Louis Caballos, who's a gang leader of the 8th Street Angels in San Pedro, um, and he's known as Lucy, um, and they call him Lucy. And I had him as a secondary character who my protagonist was going to play off of, right? Um, and they would eventually come to terms and they would work together. But Lucy took over. Um, he took over to the point to where um, almost all the readers are saying that that's their favorite character, not the protagonist, right? um, which is interesting because I never planned on that happening. My first novel, Scarecrow Gods, which won the Bram Stoker Award back in 2005, it had a character called Maxim Finks, who was a secondary character who was supposed to be somebody whom my protagonist would play off of, and then they would eventually come to terms. A very similar thing. He became larger than life, and when what happened to him at the end of the novel happened to him, people got really upset. Uh, I, 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 I think it's funny and wonderful when um, your work can take over like that. I think when it does, you really know that you have something good. You know you have something incredible. A couple weeks ago, a character in my novel, Grunt Trader, the sequel to Grunt Life, whom I wanted to do a particular thing, kind of looked me in the eye and said, "F you, you're just a writer. Let me do this." And it took me in a totally different place. And I having having seen the success that Maxim Finks had and Lucy had, I let this character do it. And it took me a while to catch up and figure out how I was going to work my overall plot around this little thing. But it's worked wonderfully once I figured it out. I just have to trust my characters. I have to trust in them. So far, they haven't let me down.
What is the reaction from your editor when things like that happen?
Well, they never know what happens. That's all the sausage making. All they want is a sausage, right? I mean, no, nobody really wants to know what goes into the sausage. So I never tell them. They just get the finished product.
Excellent. Um, so Halloween is coming up the week that this interview will be released. What is the scariest story that you would recommend to someone that you've written? You've tell us about the haunted house book.
Well, it's an idea. There's San Pedro is interesting. When I wrote this story back in the mid 2000s, um, there was less than 0.5% um, Asians in San Pedro, which is an anachronism throughout LA because they make up a significant amount of the population, but not in San Pedro. It's just really strange. Plus, there was this halfway house that I passed every single day, where the people kind of were walking out in front and they were muttering to themselves and doing what those unfortunate people do. And just the idea came together. What if there was a house that is feeling this curse, right? This 50-year-old curse. Um, and in order to fuel the curse, it needs some energy, some power. And what if people who live in San Pedro, when they die, their souls don't go to heaven? They don't go to the White House to fuel this curse. Um, you might have heard of the Battle of Los Angeles in World War II. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, that that occurred right there in San Pedro, where they had all the batteries, the big, huge guns of Navarone style cannons they had sitting there in several different batteries. And It was believed and rumored that the Japanese actually came on the island. Well, I have as the origin story for the curse, some Japanese soldiers, they come up on the island, or they come up in San Pedro. They encounter this this young girl and this young man making love in in the park, and they kill the man and they kill the girl, and the girl is actually the daughter of a bruja, right? She's a Cuban American, and her mother was a Cuban witch, and her mother's a nurse. So that's the overall tale. But within it, you have Bobby Dupree, who is a unfortunate orphan, grew up in Memphis. He's also an epileptic, which makes life kind of difficult for him. And he's come to L.A. to reclaim his birthright, which is supposed to be the double platinum album from Heartbreak Hotel, because according to the people in the home where he was raised in, his father is none other than Elvis Presley. And then you have a couple other people who are seeking their own redemption as well. Um, it's a big character-driven piece. It has gangs, it has horror, it has halfway houses, it has haunted houses, it has Elvis Presley, it has porn stars, it has just so many things. And a lot of the reviews has been there's so many things going on here. I can't believe that Weston Ochse brought all this together, and I can't believe it either. But when you write when when I decided to write this haunted house novel, I wanted all this in it. Um, I think probably one of the greatest haunted house ghost type authors out there is Peter Straub, and he tends to have all these different elements, and he tends to make them work. So, by God, if Peter can do it, I want to try and do it too.
Where do your ideas tend to come from? This is something that writers always get asked. Uh, People want to know where these crazy ideas come from. Like, how do you wake up one day and say, I'm going to write a haunted house story and it's going to have Elvis and porn stars? You know, where do those ideas come from?
Well, my standard answer is that there's this lady in Iowa who sells them on eBay for $3.99 each, right? Um,
What used to
but
they would be
since
in the back
but
of Rolling Stone or something, like when you would buy term
right,
papers. Yeah.
but since this is a supposed to be an informative broadcast, an author talking to an author, uh, it's I'll tell you how it works. It just happens. I think that you know the the RAM in my brain is always going, so I'm always ingesting pop culture, and everything I look at, everything I see, and then somehow, some way, I'll essentially, like you said, wake up, or I'll be sitting around, and then boom, the idea comes fully formed. It just comes. I can't control it. I have I have like 15 novels in progress. I want to work on every single one of them right now, but I can only work on the ones I'm contracted for. And and the way my mind works must be the way that writers' minds works. Other people's minds don't work this way. I've found that out. Um, the fact that we can just sit around, not really think of anything, and then pow, here's our novel. All we have to do is write it. It just amazes me.
I,
And of course, the more I do it, the faster and better it gets. That's why Stephen King is just pumping all this stuff out so quick, because they all come fully formed. Hell, that's probably the reason he doesn't have to outline. It's all there in his head already. It's already written,
Probably so, and someone is probably not harassing him to get the story laid out ahead of time either.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I'm very much the same way. For me it works with I'll wake up in the morning and will have had a dream, and I have this fully formed story. Just uh, and maybe not all the details, but I'll have a typically a beginning, middle, and end, and I know where the story is going to go, and I just have to write that down and then type out all the details that go in the middle. But that's a beautiful thing when it works that way. Uh,
It is. It
what?
is. It's a curse because I'm sure you've had this happen to you. You've been with a group of people, or you've been at a restaurant, or you're having dinner with somebody, and all of a sudden the idea comes to you, and you're like, shit, I got to write this down. And
Right.
and because if I don't, I'll forget it. Another idea will come and supplant it. So I've lost more ideas for being polite than I have anything else.
I believe it. I believe it. So you've got 15 things brewing. What are you working on next that you can talk about?
Um, well, right now I'm working on Grunt Trader. That's due January 1st.
Okay.
I'm hoping to get a new contract for a SEAL Team book. Um, we had talked about a trilogy, and now the trilogy's done. But I'm trying to wheedle a fourth one out of them because these are doing quite well. Um, Plus the fact that MGM is involved in Triple Six, and so is Dwayne the Rock Johnson. That's a big deal too.
Yeah, I was going to try
Um,
to tease that out of you. That has to be an amazing feeling.
oh, dude, I'm just a kid from the South like you. I didn't think I'd ever be able to talk about having a movie star, much less Dwayne Johnson, as being part of a film based on a book I wrote. Are you kidding me? I thought I would just be a writer, but it's awesome, uh, and which it might not, because Hollywood is paved with broken dreams. It's still nice to talk about. It's still a cool thing to happen to this old Southern kid.
Yeah, and until the day you die, you can say you had a film optioned by The Rock. So that's
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, exactly. It's a very cool thing, and I'm not letting it go to my head though, because um, I've seen too many people get so excited and then have that rug pulled out from under them. So I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to me. I just keep writing. So if we do that, then I'm gonna start that January 1st. If not, I have a I have a novel that I was 30,000 words into that I had to stop to begin writing Grunt Trader,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
and I'll start that again. Um, but I also have another novel that's due at the end of February, for a top secret project I'm doing with Nick Cole. Um, so there's
Never heard of him.
yeah, never heard of the guy, right? Um, uh, so there's a lot of work to be done. I think normally I write 5 pages a day, um, because that gets you to a novel in 3 months.
Sure.
But I might have to up that to about 10 pages a day, and I might have to work on multiple projects. Um, if that terrible thing happens, then I could think of worse things to happen to somebody.
Oh, absolutely. But how do you juggle writing with your day job responsibilities and family and all of that? How do you whittle out the time to do that?
Well, I'm very lucky in that I'm married to an author, Yvonne Navarro, and she totally understands, um, and she needs her time as well. Um, and I limit it to 5 pages a day. I mean, I try and write more, but I don't write less. 5 pages is pretty easy. I mean, if you're in a flow and you know where you're writing, where you're going, you can do that. That's 1,200 words. It's not that hard to do. So I don't know. I'm just able to do it.
Do you believe in writer's block?
Um, so I have this. I do. I do. There's this. Um, I wrote this blog last year about the fourth third of the novel, um, in which you get writer's block, and it's all about that. You get to that point where you're like, every word you're writing you feel is crap. You think it's terrible. You think that no one's going to want to read it. You think that the editors out there are going to laugh at you. You think that no one's going to buy it. You think your career is over, and you think that everything you're doing right now is just pure and utter crap. And I go through it every novel. Every novel I go through it takes me about a week to 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 get through that. And then I get past it, and then I'm back on the narcissism train, and I think I'm brilliant, and everything works out. I mean, it's just something that happens, you know.
Do you continue to write through that time where you feel like everything I write is crap? Like, is that something
Oh,
that
oh no, oh no, during that week I can't write. No,
you
no,
can't
I
write?
can't write during that week. I used to. That week is the week where I used to redo my web page. You know,
Nice.
I used to say, well, I can't write right now because I have to redo my web page. It's been a while, so we'll see if when this happens with Grunt Trader if I do up a new web page.
That's excellent. Uh, Weston,
I know it's easy. It's
uh, yes. Uh, so you've got a novel due to be turned in on January 1st. When will we see a new novel on the shelves, do you think?
well, Reign of Evil came out last week, so that's brand new. And that's where I take my SEAL team to England, and you get all the English mythology um, to play with. In this case, I took the Wild Hunt,
Yeah.
and I took King Arthur, and I made him a white supremacist, and and his goal is to clean. Um,
I'm sorry.
uh,
I'm just processing. You took King
I know,
Arthur and
right?
made him a white
It's,
supremacist. That's
I
amazing.
know. Well,
Uh, in
he
such a
spends too
twist. I
much
mean, amazing in such a twisted way. That's
he spends so much time being such a good hero. You know, I want him to be a person who, well, to some he's good because he wants to make England like it was when he was in England. You know, he doesn't want people who aren't Bretons to be there. You know, which means which ties directly to a lot of the social issues that are going on, not only England but America, where we have a lot of migrants and immigrants, both legal and illegal, and what's their status and what's their um, should they be living there? And I wanted to include this real world context, and that's doing gangbusters. In fact, how well this does will determine whether or not there's going to be another book. Probably, um, I think they want this to do head and shoulders above the other books, and so far it's doing pretty well. So that just hit the streets. The next one is going to be March of next year, which is going to be when the sequel to Grunt Life comes out, Grunt Trader. Um, and that'll hit the shelves in mass market paperback form. I think March 24th is the date. Today I just saw the final for the cover, which will probably be released after they get done putting on the titling, but it's pretty brilliant cover from Clint Langley.
well. I was just looking at
Well,
the Amazon ranking of the SEAL Team books, and they're doing extremely well. I think we probably will see more from this team of characters if that holds up.
it'd be fun because I have a great pitch. I have a great idea, something straight out of the news, and I'm eager to write it. Because I'm gonna really mess up my team. So I hope I get the chance to. It'd be a lot of fun. That's for sure.
I cannot wait to see what you do to these guys. That's going to be amazing. Uh, Weston, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. Where can people find you and get caught up on all of your work?
So well, they can find me at my website at westonochse.com. I'm sure you'll probably put a link there on the site. Um,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of free stuff there. There's some free audio stuff. There's some free short stories. There's a free novella or two. Um, you can find my books in pretty much every bookstore. Sometimes they might order 2 or 3 copies, and those get sold out, and they take time reordering. So if you go to a store and they don't have one of my books, just ask them to order it for you. I'm all about supporting brick and mortar bookstores, especially some of the specialty stores. I mean, the Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego is my all-time favorite store. Poison Pen in Scottsdale is right up there as well. These are both specialty stores that really cater towards the reader, and they strive to bring authors and readers together. In fact, starting 7 December, I'm going to be doing a mini West Coast tour where I start at Ventura Beach and I end up at Mysterious Galaxy. The times and dates are going to be posted on my webpage. Next weekend, however, is kind of fun because we have Tucson, which is the Tucson Science Fiction Fantasy Horror Convention. I think it's the 41st year they're doing it. Um, and they have, as their media guest of honor this year, Ernie Reyes Jr. I don't know if you know who Ernie Reyes Jr. is, but
Yes.
if you saw if you saw the rundown, he was the guy on the rope who beat the crap out of The Rock. Um, he's also been in movies like Surf Ninjas. Um, Gosh, just so many movies that I've enjoyed growing up. Anyway, he's going to be there, and not only is he a martial artist and a stuntman, but he's an actor, and I get to do the interview with him. So I'm really looking forward to sitting down with this guy in front of a whole bunch of people and putting him on the spot and asking him some tough, fun questions.
Excellent. Before I let you go, I had one other question that I wanted to ask that I forgot to ask you earlier. Um, your SEAL Team 666 series of books, and since you are from the South, and in the South we tend to be called the Bible Belt, have you gotten any pushback
Right.
from that series name?
So I was raised on the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, which is Chattanooga, Tennessee. Right.
Yes.
Um, that they had, I think, more at the time. They had more churches than any other city of that size in the nation. So I'm totally well aware of how of how the 666, um, especially the logo with 666, could come off. But I think times have changed. I think people have toned it down. I think with a lot of the TV shows out there and the CW and the whatever and Buffy and stuff like that, I think people know that, okay, there's real evil, and then there's just, we're having fun with it. And I think that pretty much everybody has realized um, that SEAL Team 666 is not a serious tome blasting Jesus or anything like that. It's just a book about a bunch of guys trying to protect America from um, things that go bump in the night.
And it's excellent fun. I tell you, it's one of the best books I've read in quite some time. Weston,
Awesome.
thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for taking time out. I know you have a hectic writing schedule, and thank you so much for coming on. And we wish you continued success. And I'm going to link up all of your works in the show notes. And thank you for coming on the show.
No, Hank. Thank you for having me and letting me be in your space for a while. It was a lot of fun, and I got my writing done today anyway, so I had plenty of time to talk to you.
Excellent. You can find more episodes of the Author Stories podcast at hankgarner.com.